Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Readers, Books and Conversation, our monthly event at the Petersham Bowling Club. If you haven't been before, welcome. My name is Michaela Kalowski, and it's an absolute delight to have you all here this evening to hear from the one and only Candice Fox. Indeed. Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't even have to do her bio. That's right, yeah. Award-winning, prodigious writer of books, loved by readers all over the world, Australian crime and thriller author. We're going to be hearing about her new one, which came out at the end of March, Devil's Kitchen. We're going to be talking about her work with James Patterson. We're going to be talking about the psychology of criminals and the psychology of the ordinary people who populate her novels as well, and why we love crime fiction and why she loves crime fiction. So we've got a lot to get through. Tonight, what I'm going to do is speak with Candice for about 45 minutes, leave time for your questions at the end. We've got our lovely Mikey and Gia who are going to come around with a microphone so you can stay comfortably in your seats. I should also point out at the front that you will have seen that delightful table of books and bookmarks, and also, very generously from the publishers at Penguin Random House, you might have seen on your chair a little pamphlet. That is the first chapter of a book that doesn't come out till October. So you get extra things when you come to the Petersham Bowling Club. And also, Candice will be signing books at the end of the evening, so you can go over at the end, buy many, many copies, have a chat with her, and so on and so forth. I do want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land we're on this evening, and to pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also now want to tell you a bit more about Candice, because she is seriously impressive, and then we will dive in. Candice Fox is the author of 10 internationally best-selling crime novels and the winner of 3 prestigious Ned Kelly Awards. In fact, she is actually the only author to have been shortlisted for that award, the Ned Kelly Award, for every single novel. Yeah.
Thank you.
She's also co-written 7 New York Times bestsellers with James Patterson, the world's best-selling thriller writer, and her new solo novel that I mentioned, Devil's Kitchen, came out in late March, and her latest collaboration with James Patterson came out in February this year. In 2022, Candice's 4th book, which people love, called Crimson Lake, was adapted into a major ABC TV series called Troppo, and Series 2 is currently in production. Candice is as powerful a researcher and interviewer as she is a writer, I would say. She's interviewed a serial killer on death row. She's been to prison 3 times for work purposes. And while on honeymoon, she famously, in the US, took road trips to visit famous crime scenes with her spouse, looking for clues. She says she's also dined with a former President of the United States, filmed cameos in her latest TV screen adaptation, and she's also a volunteer for Wires, and I saw on Instagram that she recently rescued a wallaby, so we might get to that if we have time. But please join me again in welcoming Candice Fox to the Petersham Bowling Club.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
It's very fun. It's very fun. As I said, I really want to talk about Devil's Kitchen, and I should say I'm aware that because it's very new, only maybe a few of you have read it, maybe most people haven't. So I promise there will be no spoilers this evening. But before we do that, I thought it was useful to get a sense of your kind of pathway into both into writing and into writing crime. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask, where did it start for you, and how quickly, when you started writing, did crime or thriller stories kind of come out of your brain?
Yeah, look, the writing started very early. I had a very strange childhood. My mother had 4 kids, and then she adopted 2, and then she fostered 155 kids as I was growing up.
Wow.
So the writing was an escape from that, and a situation where I had complete control over what was happening. It was all predictable. Nothing was going to happen on those pages that I hadn't planned. Whereas in the actual household, it was just chaos all the time. And she's still like that. You know, I mean, she's 70 and she doesn't foster kids. She lives, you know, with my stepdad and her semi-hoarded house. And her life is just chaos all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit like that for me now with the writing. I kind of go into open the door on my little world in which everything is exactly as I planned it to be. And so I was taking it pretty seriously at age 12. And then into my teen years, I was writing, it was all vampires and werewolves and that kind of thing. I don't know why I didn't start with crime, because there was so much crime in my life, you know. I was living in quite a scuzzy area of Bankstown. All of my friends' parents were doing drugs, and you know, all of these foster kids that were coming into the house all had their own crime story. And my mum is not a subtle person, so she was, she'd say, well, this kid's parents have just been arrested for armed robbery. How about that? Let's go and have a look at the bank that they stuck up, and sort of saying, oh, this kid's mum stripped him naked and stripped her naked, got in the car and went driving around the streets saying she was going to kill them both, and then she ran up the back of a police car. What do you think about that? And so all us kids were like, well, how did that make you feel? So I had a lot of inspiration, and it was all criminal. And my dad worked at a Sydney prison as well, so he'd come home with his prison stories, but it was only when I started studying writing that they were saying, oh, write what you know. And I'm thinking, well, actually I know a lot about crime,
It's kind of a fascinating insight that life was so chaotic that eventually writing about crime was like a peaceful place for Candice, I think.
It was, yeah, it is.
I wanted to ask you as well, and we will talk later on about, what you think, what you love about crime and what you think we love about crime fiction. But I wonder, do you think now, when you reflect on, meeting all these people who had very disrupted or violent or dramatic childhoods, and hearing about them or living close with them, whether now as an adult you feel like you've got a kind of a particular skill set that you bring to writing about the people you write about in these books?
It's sometimes I go into an interview and I'm trying to say to the person, whatever you have to say, I've probably heard worse, or I've probably seen worse, or it's not as bad as this, so I'm not going to judge you, because I've heard a lot of stuff and I've seen a lot of stuff, and I am not easily shocked. And, like with the animal rescue, sometimes I walk into people's houses and it's a clear, drug den or whatever, and they've got a possum out the back, and other rescuers would go, oh God, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's a bit of cocaine there or whatever, and so I think it makes me versatile. I can sit down and have a good conversation with a crazy homeless guy or, a billionaire. I've got a range of the ability to talk to people and to get on with people. So, yeah, it's good. And I'm probably more forgiving, I think, of people who behave badly, because I've met a serial killer, like that'll put the top of the post there for you. Everyone I meet, pretty much, no matter what they've done, is not as bad as that guy. So there's that. But he's probably he was the only person whose badness I couldn't possibly understand. Everyone else, and I'm talking about people who have killed their wives and people who, steal mail for money so that they can fund their drug habit. Everybody else, I think I can understand. I get it, you know. So, yeah.
The last one I wanted to ask you about is, and we will speak specifically about Devil's Kitchen, but and it's an incredible book for people who haven't read it yet. I almost wish I could be you who haven't read it yet, so I could go back to that state, because I didn't want it to end, and I really mean that. But I wanted to ask you what you think is at the heart of a really gripping crime or thriller novel. What makes it work?
The stakes have to be high. I'm talking about myself, because there are some crime books that come out and I start to read them and I go, oh God, what is compelling you through that? I don't get it. For me, the stakes have to be high, and they have to be high for someone who I care about. I was reading the work of a very successful crime author recently, and there was a couple of kid victims in it, and he didn't tell me anything at all about those kids. They'd been murdered, okay, and they're 7 and 9 years old, all right, but that was it. That was it. And he was really relying on me to care about these fictional kids just because they were kids. And I'm like, well, they're nice kids. You know what I mean? Like, did they like SpongeBob?
Did they steal mail?
Yeah, did they steal people's mail? But you know what I mean? And the more you can do that, I was like, throw me a little bone, just a little he'll tell me that, you know, she really liked ducklings or something, or he, you know, hated his teacher. And I'm like, I hated a teacher too, you know, and so I care about this kid. But the more you can load on all of that stuff that makes me care about this character, the more whatever the mission is, he's going out and he's trying to get his favorite burger at this restaurant and they don't sell it anymore. And I'm like, man, what are you going to do? Because I love that guy so much.
Yeah.
Now, whatever mission he's on, I'm like, oh, you know. So it's that. It's characters that you care about. And if you care about them a lot and the stakes are high, it's life or death, then you're, you know, through the pages, whoosh, 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 you know?
Absolutely. And whoosh, whoosh, whoosh is exactly how it feels reading Devil's Kitchen. It's set in New York. We're amongst firefighters. We're amongst crooked firefighters. Can you give us, it's better in Candice's words, tell us who we meet and what's going on in this story?
Well, so the characters are actually based on real people. There was a crew of builders that came around my house. And yeah, I know, builders. You never know where inspiration is going to come from. I just sit and I wait. And I met these builders and I was talking to them and being around them when they were talking to each other. And I was like, ooh, this is juicy. This is good. Just the dynamic. They were very dodgy.
You mean the dynamic between the crew?
Yeah, the guys,
Yeah,
just
right.
the way that they, everyone had their role, you know, and there were unexpected things. Like there was a guy and he had no front teeth whatsoever, really rough. He shot himself in the hand with a nail gun and he was like, ah, damn it, you know, and he threw the nail away, type of thing, really tough. And he was there for a couple of weeks, and as I learned things about him, it was just so unexpected. He's bidding on an oil painting in an auction because he's a real art enthusiast and all this. And I'm like, who is this guy? It's so complex. And then the leader of them, who inspired Matt, was just this phenomenon of a man who swept in like a storm, and because he was managing all these different building sites. So they would get word from another building site like, Matt's coming, get ready, you know, and so they, oh, put this away, put that, and if he says this, just say it's that. And there was all this nervousness.
Yeah.
And he comes and he's a big guy in a big truck, and he one of those guys that walks like this, you know, and he was just, I was like, whoa, he's just sort of a scary man. And then there was the guy that inspired Ingo. I installed cameras at my house after he left because I was like, he knows where I live. Oh my God. You're true psychopath. Like,
Yeah.
you just, gives you just chills up your spine. And he was a born-again Christian, which is fine.
No judgment. She has no judgment
No,
about
no
that. She
judgment.
said she's not judgmental.
What I thought was interesting is that I've met a few born-again Christians, and usually you kind of think, well, why did you have to kill that person that you were and get born again? Like, what did you do? But also, the born-again Christians that I've met, they want to talk about Jesus a lot, you know. This guy wanted to talk about Satan a lot. You know, he's like...
Tip off, right?
Yeah. You know, I was putting some music on or whatever, and he's like, you know who likes rap music, don't you? Satan. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Well,
And me.
Yeah, me as well, yeah.
So, you know, in this novel, we meet this crew of firefighters in New York, one of whom, Matt, is the leader who was involved in 9/11, and it broke him. I mean, they're all very broken characters, and we'll talk about sort of broken non-heroes and heroes as well. But I wanted to ask you about the research around fires and firefighting is incredible in this book. I mean,
thank you.
just that alone, but there are a whole of these really interesting kind of cross strands of story that intersect throughout the book, and you never get lost, and it's over 400 pages. It's a feat. But tell me about how you got access. How hard is it to get access to some of these firefighters?
It is incredibly hard.
Okay.
Even here in Australia, I started talking to fireys here in Australia, you know, because I'd started the book before I could get to New York. And, you know, even then it was like, no, we don't talk to writers, we don't do this, don't take any photos of us, don't name us. But I went through all the official channels, and I wrote to FDNY, I wrote to the chief, I wrote to the media person, I wrote to individual chiefs of individual fire stations, not only in New York and Manhattan, but over in Jersey and, you know, Staten Island. And I was, you know, but I was very honest about what I was doing. I was saying to them, I'm I'm a fiction writer. You know, here's my website. Here's my credentials. I'm a real person. I'm writing a fiction book, and in it, the firefighters are the bad guys. Because I didn't want to exploit them. I was going to exploit them. You know, I couldn't help but exploit them because that's what you do, you know, in this job. But I didn't want to, you know, do that and then halfway through go, hey, and they're the bad guys as well, you know, and load that on. So I wanted to come in. When I met the serial killer on death row, in my first letter, I said to him, I believe that you are a vicious and horrible murderer, and I have no respect for you at all. This is not a sympathy-building exercise. I believe you're a monster, so please know that before we get into anything. So with them, I was saying, yeah. And it was a flat-out no from everyone. And I was like, fair enough. And, you know, but I'd booked the plane tickets. I'd booked the trip. I was going to go. I was going to make it work. And so my very tolerant husband, my very supportive and forgiving husband, said to me what he says to me a lot. You know, he said, what is your plan exactly? And I said what I say a lot. I said, no, I don't have one. I'm just going to make it work. And he said, all right, have fun. You know, let me know how you go.
Yeah.
The faith that this guy has in me sometimes is really unwarranted. And so I thought I'll just go there and I'll walk from fire station to fire station and see what I can do. Or I'll hang out in known firefighter bars, and I'll say, drinks are on me, you know, that kind of thing. Those were my loose plans. I started in Times Square, which is a terrible place to start, I learned later, because in Times Square, about 100,000 people come into Times Square every day, and their fire station is right here, right on the corner. And every time they roll the garage door up, there are people going, oh my God, New York firefighters, oh my God, you know, can we have a selfie? Can we touch you? Can we touch the engine? You know. So I was walking in, and I also had no speech prepared, because I had 50,000 things to try to communicate to them all at once. So, you know, I walked in, there's 8 of them standing there all doing their things, you know, sliding down a pole, whatever. And I walked in and I said, excuse me, hi. And they all turned around and I'm like, oh God. I said, my name's Candice, and I'm from Australia. I'm a writer, a fiction writer. I'm legit. You can buy my book in bookstores and stuff. And I'm here. I'm writing a book. I'm researching firefighters. And I was wondering if there's anyone here who would want to speak to me. You don't have to. You can go on the record or off the record. It's fine. I won't name you. It's not. I'm not a journalist. It's not a non-fiction. I'm not trying to stir up any September 11 stuff, unless you want to talk about that, which would be fine. I'm not a buff, and I'm not a groupie, and I'm not a tourist, and by this time they're all going, what? And I'm going, and they said, oh, no. Like, they were sort of, and I went, okay, well, that's fine. Well, thank you very much for listening. And I went to the next fire station. And I delivered that speech a few times, and then they just kept saying, no. FDNY says never to talk to writers, any kind of writers ever. And no one will speak to you, and you might as well give up. And one guy said, to your speech, you should add, and I'm like, I should add? You should add that this is not an integrity test. And I said, what's that? And he said, FDNY will sometimes send around good-looking ladies. And I was like, well,
thank you.
To do what exactly?
Keep going.
Yes,
Keep talking.
Keep going. To come in and say, hi, I'm a tourist, and my van, which is full of other good-looking ladies, has just broken down, and we don't know what to do. Can you please come and help us change our tyre? And once the firefighters have changed the tyre, they say, oh, well, do you want to get in the back and have some beers with us or whatever, exchange phone numbers or whatever? And it's a sort of
it's a test.
It's a test, yeah. Or a pretty lady comes in and hands in a wallet, and it's got $500 cash in it, and they go, I just found it, I thought I'd hand it to you, and then they see whether they take any of the cash.
Yeah. In your book, they would take the cash.
They would. Oh, and so I tried all these different stations, and they all said no, and I added the integrity test thing, and they said no. And then one guy said, look, I'm not going to help you, But I know a guy who is both a firefighter and a fiction author. And so he's kind of breaking the rules anyway. So he might talk to you. And I said, oh my God, can you give me his number? And he said, no. But I'll tell you,
It's kind of amazing that she's here on the stage at all.
Yeah,
really.
I know. Which is really, it was a couple of days of me going, I'm really not making this work at all. This is not working. And he said, I'll give you his full name. You can look him up and find him yourself. And I did. And I found him.
Yep.
His name was Jason, and he was my ticket in.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And I said to him, can I talk to your friends? And he said, I'll check. And then he said, it's a maybe. And I said, well, for this maybe, I'm going to come to your station. What should I bring? I said, in Australia, I said to them, what should I bring to pay you? Slab of beer or whatever. And they said, no, it's cake. If you want anything from a firefighter, you bring cake. And I was like, okay. I said, what do they bring in America? And he said, oh, it's cake. It's the international language of firefighters.
Of loving firefighters, yeah.
So
Awesome.
I brought a stack of cake.
Yeah.
And then they let me in and they told me everything. And I stood at the table. They were all there at the table. And I said, tell me about your worst thing. Tell me about your stupidest fire ever. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. And then there was one chief who had not been in September 11, but he was part of the recovery effort afterwards. And I said to him, would you mind if I took you to, coffee, beer, dinner, a show, whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
Your level of
Cat cafe, anything.
Choose your level of commitment, but I would want to talk to you about things that you might not want to talk about. I didn't say September 11, but I was like, if you want to, then you can.
Yeah.
And we went to dinner, and he just poured out 4 hours worth of stuff, like trauma, and I just tried to catch it all. I was like, oh my God. And I made it very clear, again, I was like, these are bad guys. And one of these guys was in 9/11. He's all messed up about it, and that's kind of what made him go bad. And he's like, oh, I could absolutely believe that happen, that happening. But all of the pouring out wasn't just about September 11. It was his divorce and his daughter and another guy that he lost in a fire and this and things that he's seen. And I had a notebook and pen. And I just put them aside, and I was just I was like, give it to me. I'll take it. Give me all of the pain. And I was like, okay, thank you very much. And I just carried it off. The whole time I was thinking, what is he getting from this? What does he want from this? And then afterwards, I thought, I think he just wanted
to talk.
Yeah,
and have someone who would listen. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said in my introduction about Candice. I reckon she's as good an interviewer and a researcher as she is a writer, because so many of the stories you can hear are from, as you said just now, from people you really listen to. I wanted to ask you two questions, sort of a content question and a Devil's Kitchen question.
Sure.
Which is where did the idea come from for firefighters, and what is it about this crew of people, Engo, Matt and Ben in particular, who are attracted? What is it about those kinds of people who are attracted to going to work every day where you might be stepping over charred remains?
It's the firefighting thing attracts different people for different reasons. Some of them have that hero complex, which I think is what I do with the animal rescue, is that buzz where you walk in and this situation is dire, it's awful, people are panicking, and you walk in and you're like, never fear, I know exactly what to do, and everyone knows, oh, thank you, and that feeling makes me go, yeah. But then, there are those adrenaline junkies who like the danger, and they're terrible to have on the job because they take those high risks and that kind of thing. A lot of those guys that I spoke to, the firefighters over there, their dads had been firefighters and their granddads had been firefighters, and that kind of thing. So, yeah, a lot of... what was the first part?
The first part was why... I mean, you talked about meeting the builders, that crew of builders in your house, where you were like, oh my God, who are these guys?
Yeah.
But why turn them into firefighters for the book? Because it's a fantastic part of the book as well.
Yeah, well, I actually pitched this novel to my very posh agent, Gabby, who lives in Bronte, a very posh woman. And it was that crew of builders, those guys, and their dynamic, they find a body on a building site, and they have to work together. And I was just interested in their dynamic. But she said, Candice, most people don't find builders very intriguing. And I was like, well, come to my house and just meet these guys. And she was like, could it be something sexier? Could it be something that I could pitch, you know? And I was like, okay, what about firefighters? All right, okay. And so it kind of grew from there.
Okay.
You know.
I love it.
She's a funny woman, yeah. But it's the... I had so much fun with the relationship between those four guys because Matt is terrifying, and then there are those little wisps of gentleness that you get from him every now and then. And then Jakey is terrified, but then there are strange aspects to his character that you have to look very closely to see. They're all into this criminal enterprise for different reasons. Matt hates himself. Ben doesn't know any better, any different, or he's resigned to that, you know, because of how he grew up. Engo's just a psychopath, and Jake's easily led. And, you know, meeting a serial killer really ruined serial killers for me because they're so uninteresting.
I hate it when that happens. I hate it.
But he was so uninteresting. He was so he's just bad, and there's something wrong with his brain, and that for the rest of criminality, all those other reasons that people do it. There was no saving Lawrence. Lawrence was his name. There was no saving him. From the moment he was born, he was just a monster. And there was no growth. There was no remorse. There was nothing. He was just bad to the bone. But I'm so interested in those other types of criminality. People who are tempted to go bad and then they come back and... You know?
And in the book as well, all of these guys, they call in a fire that hasn't happened. They then go to the fire and they commit a robbery, or they commit a robbery next door to where the fire is, and then no one kind of knows what's happened in all the chaos. So they've been doing this for a couple of years. And as Candice brilliantly creates these very different characters who are motivated by very different things, and you're reading and learning about them, but at the heart of the book really is Andy. And Andy has come into, she's what she wants into the crew. And the book sort of opens and closes with her story, and then we sort of go back in time. But Andy is a fantastic character. She's not the first strong female character you've written. You know, we've had, you know, Eden Archer, we've had, you know, Amanda Farrell in Crimson Lake, Celine Osborne in The Chase, Blair Harbour in Gathering Dark. You know, I wondered where did Andy come from? Where does a character like her, who's so complicated and so damaged and so completely enthralling, where did she come from for you? Why is she at the heart of it all?
I think that the female leads are always some version of me, but she's right out on the branch, completely like a fictional imagining of me if I was at my toughest and bravest and most, you know, I have a lot of trauma, and I have this big, beautiful, bright mask over the top of it, and you can't tell, and I spend a lot of my time making people laugh and talking about my childhood. Wasn't it weird and wacky? But Andy doesn't have any mask at all, and although... You know, she has this job that she does where she completely pretends to be other people.
And that's how she survives.
Yeah, but there's no humour, there's no working it into her personality. She has to stop being who she is to deal with her trauma. You know, but someone like Amanda Farrell is much closer to who I actually am. You know, I'm kind of a bit... you know, goofy and whatever. We'll try. We'll see what happens. We'll throw some mud at it, see if it sticks. And so, they all have, all the female leads have some part of me in them.
How do you build a character like Andy? I mean, it's a 400 pages, and I don't keep saying it like it's too long. It's just, it is a long time to keep you learning stuff about Andy at the 440-page mark. You know, you're learning all these intricate little things about her and what makes her tick. And you said before that, you know, she's got this kind of way of coping, which is that she sort of works outside the justice system. And I was sort of saying this to Candice before tonight. She almost feels like Hamlet, but not Hamlet. She's like Hamlet, but full of action, where something's happened in her life, and we're not spoiling anything, and we don't learn it for a while in the book, that's so extreme that her only way of coping is to sort of go outside the social code. Nothing to do with society is going to work for her when it comes to justice. And so she hires herself out to people. She's not with the police force. She sort of turns up in your life when you've written a letter to the police force for 9 months saying, I can't find my brother, where is he? She just turns up and assumes a role. She assumes a mask. And I love the way you create, that's the only way she can survive.
Thanks, yeah. I mean, it's a safe place for her. I think she does say that at some point, that this is, when I'm actively doing this, her job is not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Yes.
She doesn't have holidays from this where she goes back and has an apartment, has stuff.
And she doesn't have anyone who knows who she is.
No,
there's no one in the book who knows what her real name is.
Yeah.
But I wonder, from a writing perspective, how do you build a character like Andy? Because I feel like like I met her.
Oh, right. Look, they all start as a mystery to me in the beginning. I made sure there were stylistic choices, like you're not in the first person with Andy because that's too intimate. I wanted her to be more mysterious to you. I didn't want you to know how she thinks. And so I've only got clues. And when she's there in the cafe the first time that she meets Ben, she's holding herself in a certain way. She's got blonde hair and glasses and all this, and she's very mysterious. She's just giving him little bits. But I'm getting to know her the whole time and thinking about her in my everyday life. I'm writing a novel right now and I do a lot of thinking about it. I was in Singleton last night, which is 2.5 hours drive from where I am, and I didn't put the radio on, I didn't put a podcast on. I just thought for 2.5 hours while driving and saying to myself, why was she a lawyer? Why did she start as a lawyer? Could it have been this? Could it have been that? You just figure out all of the life choices that they have made. So I started with her as this undercover specialist and just asking myself, what could have happened to her? What is the thing that would happen to you that would inspire you to do that? Why? Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, what kind of thing could have happened to Matt in 9/11 that would have left him unable to relate to anyone else who was in 9/11, because some of those guys banded together and formed, communities, and they were all in this together, but he's away from everyone else. Yeah. He's not dealing with it. How did he grow up, and where did he grow up, and what were his parents like? And you won't write all of that stuff. You'll just know it. And it's just a lot of getting to know you, and the dialogue teaches me a lot. Because sometimes I'll just have two characters meet each other, in this situation and just see what they say to each other, and the way that Ben and Andy were talking. And her responses, and he's looking at his eggs, he can't look at her, and she's she's there and she's pretending to read the paper, their gestures and things, I just get a sense of them as I go. It's the short answer is one brick at a time, and sometimes you make the wrong decision. This book that I'm writing right now, I've just deleted 10,000 words of it because I just cast the wrong person in that role. And I'm like, you're a good guy, I like you, but you're not going to be in this book because you don't get on with
Sorry, mate.
her. Yeah, and I'll just...
Bye, see ya.
Yeah, put him over here somewhere, use him later on maybe.
Yeah.
But they had no reason to hate each other. And I'm like, I need her to be working with someone she hates. Who would she hate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's an ex-boyfriend.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And you do that really beautifully as well in The Crew, which is the crew don't get on.
No.
There's all this conflict and argy-bargy and constant power, both struggles and tussles.
Yeah. Well, that's what the builders were doing the whole time. They're henpecking each other, henpecking the whole time, and power plays and what are you going to do about it, and this kind of thing. And Tolerant Tim, my husband, he
trademark. Tolerant Tim.
Tolerant Tim. He's known on social media as Tolerant Tim because I put all the things. The other day, I put one up about how I had to go to Tim and say, Tim, you know how you love me? And he's like, yes. And I said, the car still smells like wallaby. I'm sorry, and this kind of thing. Tolerant Tim said to me, every time I look out the window, you are out there amongst the builders and they're all standing around you talking. You're costing us money. What are you doing? And I said, these guys are going to make us money. Yeah. Trust me. Just leave me alone. I'm being inspired. Right now. He's like, oh. And then I wrote this and he's like, okay.
He was right. You were right. Right. That's right. Yeah. I don't know if we would call, at the sort of the heart of the book, you've got Andy and Ben. Ben is in the crew. When we meet Ben, I'm not spoiling anything, his girlfriend of 10 months. They've been together almost a year.
I don't remember.
Yeah, 8 months maybe. A woman called Luna, who is a pottery maker, and a Latina woman who's really...
I was doing pottery at the time.
Yeah, she's a beautiful character. And she's kind of, her parents came to America and dragged themselves through everything and sent her to great art school. And she's got a little boy who's 3.5 called Gabe. And at the beginning
Violet was 3.5, my daughter.
Okay. Yeah. And so Luna and Gabe have gone missing. And Luna was Ben's partner, and Ben became a kind of a pseudo-father for Gabe. And Ben's life, when we learn about his life, was a life of just being bounced around in the worst possible ways for a child, and he really feels like maybe he could have a family. So he's desperate to find out what's happened to Luna and to Gabe. And so at the heart of the book, we've got Andy, this very complicated woman with a very dark past, and we've got Ben. And I don't know that they're heroes. I wanted to ask you about the whole notion of flawed heroes. I mean, all the way back to Raymond Carver and Dashiell Hammett, we've got these broken, alcoholic, lonely, maladjusted, kind of mostly
like
men.
Every man I've ever dated.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, so we're not the whole notion of a kind of the broken, flawed hero is not new to us.
Yeah.
But, I guess what I'm asking, would you call Andy and Ben heroes? And what do we love about the flawed hero? What do we love about these characters, particularly in crime novels?
They're just far more interesting than good people. Good people, really good people who they just have no depth. And I mean in books.
Except for the serial killer, who was also a bit, you said he was a bit bland, really.
Well, there's a spectrum, isn't there? There's a bell curve. Really, really super duper good people are really uninteresting. And then there's, things get, the more grey area you kind of get, super interesting, and then you come down here to serial killers and not interesting at all, So in here you have people who are good but are constantly tempted to be bad, and bad people who every now and then throw a good deed in and everyone goes, oh, that was unexpected. Yeah, there you go. And so, they're the most interesting ones. And I think that, someone's motivations being questionable. You wouldn't believe the amount of men who have been shocked by Andy using her body. Andy uses, no spoilers, but Andy uses her sexual powers a couple of times in this book. She sleeps with people.
Yeah.
To get what she wants.
Yeah.
And a couple of radio interview men have been like, there was one guy in a small radio station, and she uses her body, and I was like, she does, and it's hers, and she can do what she likes with it.
Yes, she can.
He was clutching his pearls a little bit about it. So I'm playing with all of those lines because if you went to, writing, the prestigious writing college, they might say your hero needs to be morally perfect and driven for justice and always making the right choice. But if your hero is a little bit selfish or weird or slutty or whatever, broken, everyone kind of goes, oh, well, I have been selfish. I have been, I have been weird. I have been, they're more relatable. And you don't know what they're going to do next because they're a real person.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a lot of sort of complicated crisscross of different psychologies in this book. A lot of it about what makes people do criminal things, what makes a criminal. But you also have great psychological insights about what attracts certain people to each other and what repels people. Why did Ben and Luna magnetise? Why Ben and Andy kind of connected? But I wondered how much you've alluded to growing up in the places and in the way that you did, and also absorbing those things yourself. But I also wondered if you've done research into kind of criminal psychology, because it feels so It feels so real. It really jumps off the page as feeling like you're really glimpsing inside the skull of these people, and you don't hate them and you don't judge them and you can't forget about them.
I think you have to understand why. The only person in this book you really can't understand why he is how he is Ingo, is because he's just a monster, and in that way, he's just a slimy, horrible monster. He's a bit of fun. Has anyone ever seen that show Deadwood?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the Al Swearingen.
Yes.
I don't want to know his backstory because he's just Al Swearingen. He's just bad.
But also, Candice has given him this thing where he's missing fingers on both hands. He's got kind of like claws.
Ingo was missing.
Was he?
Yeah, and he had all these different. The real Ingo had all these different stories about how he lost a finger, and I listened to them all, and he wouldn't tell me. He was like, crocodile, and I said to the real Ben, I said, come on, how did Ingo lose a finger? And he goes, Candice, he's a builder. He ran over it with a circular saw. I'm like, okay, oh well. I thought it was going to be he had a lot of great stories. I shouldn't have asked him.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the question?
No, just I wondered how much research you've done into kind of criminal psychology.
Yeah.
Because not to draw too much connection between what you described about your childhood, but there's living with stuff and seeing stuff and trying to absorb it, and as you say, living with the trauma of all the things you've seen and experienced. But there's a depth to these characters, and it is kind of fascinating about what makes people do certain things at certain times. And she doesn't signpost any of it to you. When we start to get a sense of what might have happened to Luna, you're like, no way, and you're 400 pages in, which is unusual, I think, in a book.
Yeah, it's. I want you to be constantly questioning why these people are the way that they are. One petal at a time, just unfolding them, and I think that I see a lot of. Because people write to me and they say, oh, Candice, I want to be a writer where you look at my work. And I go, yeah, sure, I'll look at a little bit. Because I try to, because nobody ever helped me. I wrote to lots and lots and lots of writers. Nobody ever... Anne Rice wrote back.
Okay. Wow.
I know. And John Connolly. Who is the nicest person ever. So I've heard. I haven't met him in person.
Okay.
And I look at the work of new writers. And the first couple of pages are telling me everything about that character, where they went to school and how they grew up and how long they've been in their job. And I'm reading it and it's like a resume. I'm like, can you get this guy to actually do something?
Yeah.
Like he's just sitting on a ledge at this point, but I've got his whole CV here.
Why would you read the book?
Yeah. I'm constantly saying, you have this anxiety to tell me everything about him so I'll get on board with him. But he hasn't done anything, so how can what am I on board with? So I'm like, take all of those things and just scatter them across the rest of the novel. So that very last thing that's on his CV, you're learning that at the very end of the novel. And and every single one of those things about him on his CV needs to be so interesting that you get one and you go, oh, I can't wait for the next one. You go, oh, that's good. Well, that's why she did that thing. Oh, what's the next one? So if you have 8 main characters and you're just scattering all of that stuff, all those little details about them all the way through, I make you wait for a long time to learn what happened to Matt in September 11, and it's his current wife who tells you, and it was a delight to write it because I'd been waiting for so long to say, this is what happened to him and this is why he's so angry, and so hopefully for you that's the payoff you get. It's like halfway through or something.
Yeah,
and
it
you
is
go,
more than halfway through.
And so it's the action. You've got to balance that with the action. All of those tiny little details about people and their histories have to come up organically while the action's happening. Yeah.
And I love that description of kind of unfolding the flower, like the petals. Is that part of how you control the pace as well?
Yeah, it is. Because otherwise, if you're trying to introduce everyone and where they've come from and what they've done, it clunkifies. That's not a word, but it is now. It clunkifies.
You're the writer. It's a word. It's a word.
It clunkifications all of the the dialogue and the scenes and, you know, all of that thing. These people aren't going to tell you these things about themselves until it comes up, you know, until it's useful. So I don't tell you straight up, you know, that I don't know, I don't know what I'm trying to say. You got to be curious. I have to create some curiosity in you, you know. So yeah.
We were talking before about Andy and the fact that you allude early in the book and throughout the book until we learn about. We come to the section where there's a flashback and we learn what happened to Andy before in her life before her life was kind of broken into the before and after. Yeah. And you allude throughout the book to things she's seen. Terrible things she's seen and terrible things that she's seen done. Yeah. Or that maybe have been done to her. Yeah. But you never take us so close. You don't tantalise us with it. It's never cheap. Yeah. And you don't show us so much of it that we're like, oh God, now I'm freaking out because I'm wondering what the hell she experienced. And I wanted to ask you that question about crime because at the heart of crime fiction, and this is, I think, as much of maybe a thriller as it is a crime novel, I don't know.
Call it what you want.
Bit of both. Is that there's always got to be a crime, and in some books those crimes can be really brutal. And I guess I wanted to ask you, especially thinking about the way you control how close we get to Andy's darkness, how you've decided for yourself as a writer over all these books about how far is too far when it comes to writing about violence and a crime.
I really think that the heavy lifting of graphic violence is always done best by the reader. You give the reader the setup and the aftermath, and they do all that stuff themselves. And, you know, so... And I mean, people say to me all the time, oh, Hades, your first one, Hades, is one of my favourite books. Oh my God, it touched me in such emotional ways. And my 12-year-old daughter wants to read it. And I said, yeah, okay, you can read it. And I think to myself, on paper, the body count in that book is like 45. Like it is a hellishly violent book, and all of this stuff happens to all these people. But you never see it happening, you know. And I just don't put graphic violence in my books because I don't need to. I don't need to do that, particularly sexual violence and that kind of. I'm not interested in going into that. You don't need to see that. And every woman on the planet has imagined graphic sexual violence in so many different ways anyway. I don't need to spell it out
It's not something we need to read.
Yeah, it's a terror that we live with every single day. Every dark car park that you ever go into, every talk you ever had with your mum about strangers, and, you know, like, you're doing that stuff anyway. I don't need to do that for you. What I can do for you is show you something that you haven't seen or imagined. I can show you this diner that they have in Manhattan where, you know, they have the thing and the crash of the fry baskets and the guys, hey, you know, because you haven't been there, but I have been there. And I'll tell you what that's like. But I don't need to patronise you with things that you already fear deep down in your soul, and so letting you do that yourself is a lot scarier for you, I think.
Absolutely. Do you think we're beginning to move away from the whole, often the victims in crime novels are women or children or both? Are we starting to move away from that a bit?
No, I think that the women and children are still getting it in crime fiction novels. And I mean, I don't know that that's a bad thing, because should we all just pretend that women aren't, you know, usually the murder victim, and that there aren't women being murdered like on the daily, like usually by their partners? Shouldn't you try to reflect reality? And reality is that it's, you know, it's that is something that women live with, but also it's more challenging to stray away from that, and to have male victims and to have unlikable victims as well. You know, I teach creative writing every now and then, you know, a couple of times a year when I'm asked to, and I do this victim exercise, and I sort of say, here's 5 victims for your novel. Pick one, and which one is the hardest to get the reader to care about. And the one that we talk about the most is this guy named Gary. And Gary's like, he's a white guy in his 50s, and he's a chain smoker, and all of his employees hate his guts, and he's cheating on his wife, and all this kind of stuff. And then I say, all right, how can we make the reader care about him? Because the reader is going to be kind of like, I'm glad he's dead. He was a prick, But so we house, what you do is you just house that character in all these other elements that you would care about. His wife, even though he was a total prick, she's really upset. So you want justice for her, and you add an incredible puzzle to it. Like Gary made a phone call 3 minutes before he died, and he said a code, and the code opened this, and you go, I don't give a shit about Gary really, but I want to know what this whole code thing is, and so there are all these strategies. So as crime fiction gets smarter, I suppose you might get away from, those victims that it's easy to care about because that's the trope, and into more complex victims maybe. Don't know.
So you talk about teaching creative writing, teaching crime writing when you can, and you've got a beautiful acknowledgement in the back of this book about the people who really helped you learn.
Oh, yeah.
And I wondered, you've been writing now for a good long time. You're a New York Times bestselling author. You write with James Patterson. The books just get better and better. I suppose when you look back on the things they taught you and the things you've integrated, has the way you approach the writing changed a lot now? And also, what are some of the real standout things to you where you still come back to that nugget and use that?
God. Yes. There are just lessons that echo through my mind all the time. Just little micro lessons like, the exercise that they give you in writing class where they say, fresh fish sold here. Have you heard of that one?
No.
Okay. Well, imagine there's a shop, and there's a bay of ice, and there's all this fish out there for sale, fresh fish, and the sign says fresh fish sold here today, and they say, well, let's edit the sign down. And you go, well, you could take today away, because if you're seeing the sign and the fish, then you know it's today. Fresh fish sold here. Well, you could take the here out. We don't, because it's there, and eventually you just get rid of the whole sign, because you don't need any of those words, because the fresh fish are there, and what the fuck else would they be doing there if they weren't for sale? Here today. So yeah, I kind of go through, and every single word that I don't need, I go, fresh fish sold here, Yeah, it's James Patterson as well is not a very subtle man. He doesn't load on the praise, and so when we're working together, he's constantly going, well, why do I care? Well, why do I want to turn from that page to the next page? What is my reason for doing that? And what about, so he's been a magnificent writing teacher for me. The thing about teachers, which I really appreciate, is that your mum loves your work. She's going to tell you it's amazing. Your friends are probably going to tell you your work is amazing. And if you pay someone to edit your work, they want your business. They've just taken $800 from you, and they're probably hoping for another $800. So they'll tell you that your work is amazing. But a teacher, he'll tell you that your work sucks, and they still get paid. Like there's no sort of incentive for them. So they will look at it and go, no, I wasn't convinced, or whatever. So I appreciate their honesty and their reliability of teachers. The first writing class I ever went to, my mother actually talked my way into it, because it was an adult class, creative writing class at TAFE, and she called him up and she said, my kid is 15 and really wants to be a writer. Can she go into this class? I know it's an adult class, and they let me in. And I remember where I sat in that class and listening to the other writers, and I remember their individual stories, and I remember things that she said, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, So I just don't think I would be the writer that I am unless I had studied it. And I see people's work all the time, like I say, and I don't say it in these words, but I say, do you think about studying it? Because, yeah, you know, you can teach yourself the violin, but then if you go and take some music lessons, it's like, hey, you know, they can teach you this. They can make you better. That's what they're for, you know.
I love to hear that. The last thing I want to ask you, and then it's going to be time for your questions in a moment, is how much else you read, whether you read outside crime genre, whether you can only read inside crime genre. Can you read while you're writing?
I do. I don't read a lot because I'm very, very fussy, and I look at the mechanics of stuff and I go, well, I wouldn't have done that, and I would have done that, and I know that guy, and he's a jerk, and, you know. So right now I am reading The Hunter by Richard Stark. That's Donald Westlake writing as Richard Stark, and I only was reading it because Thomas Jane, who stars in Troppo, yeah, he was out here doing a Mark Wahlberg thing, and I said, what is the thing? And he said, they're adapting The Hunter, and I said, haven't read it, and he was appalled, and he said, you get it right now, and I said, okay. And then while I was reading it, I was like, this is like the bad Jack Reacher. So I wrote to Lee, my friend Lee Child, and I was like, you must have eaten this up. And he was like, oh, shit, yes, you know. So I'm really enjoying it. That's my recommendation. But it's very, very hard for me to read. I'm tired. I don't want to pick up anyone else's voice. Yeah. Very impatient. I know these people and I want to like the book, and then this is hard for me to read. Yeah.
Okay. It's time for your questions for Candice. We're going to turn the lights on and see your lovely faces.
Ah, there's people out there.
There we go.
Wow. I thought it was just us.
We've got, I think it's Gia's got the microphone. Here we go. More lights. There we go.
Hey.
If you have a question for Candice, we would love to hear from you. There's a question up the back. Thank you, Greg, for going first.
There's a mic coming around.
Hi, Candice.
Hi.
Hi. I was in the writers' room for the first season of Troppo, so I got to take Crimson Lake apart, and then just became obsessed and read everything that you've written, and absolutely love you. And concentrating on your work and thinking about it and dreaming about it just made me absolutely admire you and
thank you.
Adore you as a writer.
Oh, I love you too.
I'd love to ask.
Yeah.
I find that I love your characters and I love your plots, and I think they work incredibly well together. And I'd love to know do you start with character? Do you start with plot? Is it how does character inform plot? How does plot inform character?
It's different book to book, whether I start with character or plot. So, for example, the one I'm writing right now, I just saw a news story. A guy fell off a cruise ship. It was about a year ago now, and it was a very new, and everyone went, oh, he fell off, and they didn't find him. I don't know how he's dead. Oh, how awful. And the whole rest of the world went, oh, well. And I went, but what if he didn't? What if? And so basically I've got these two people who fall off a cruise ship, and they're picked up by a fishing boat, and they're there, and everything's three nefarious characters on this fishing boat, and they, after a while, they sort of start going, have we been abducted? And so then I added the characters, and I was like, who are these two? So one's a criminal defence lawyer and one's a divorce lawyer. So they're both lawyers. And you add that. And on the cruise ship, I've got her personal assistant and her ex-boyfriend. And so I added long story short, I added the characters after, I had the plot this time. And when I work with James Patterson, it's always plot first and characters later and that kind of thing. It just depends. And with Devil's Kitchen, I had the guys, I just didn't know what to do with them. I was going to have them being essentially sort of good-ish guys finding a body. The police don't take it seriously, and they go, well, we're builders. We can do anything. Let's solve this crime ourselves. So they were going to be good. But then after a while, I was thinking, these guys in real life aren't good. Why would I make them good in a book? You know, Jesus Christ! I hope they never find out that I've written this book.
Exactly. Don't tell anyone.
God,
Whatever you do.
Nobody tell them.
Yeah.
I do run into the real Matt every now and then.
Oh, wow.
I have this weird relationship with him where I text him about something random, and then I run into him 2 days later.
Oh, yeah.
He had a
That's not random.
Yeah, well, I
I don't think that's random. She describes Matt in the book where everyone's talking and there's argy-bargy and they're at pubs and they're drunk and they're being rowdy and he's got the finger of death.
The finger of death.
And he
had
points
that
the
in
finger
real
of you and
life.
everyone just shuts up. It's amazing.
You
So
look,
such a
I
great...
would look out my office window and I'd see Matt and he'd be going, and every time he would do it, the guys would go, ooh, like he
It's
had
almost like it's a
laser.
curse.
Yeah, like the laser
Yeah.
coming out of the finger. Yeah,
Yeah.
the real guy. Yeah, I ran into him maybe, a week ago. I was at a pub and I heard, Candice, and I looked around, because the book's just come out.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, oh.
He's like, what do you do? You're like, nothing. I haven't written anything. I haven't written
God,
anything. I'm doing
it's you.
nothing right
Please
now.
don't
Yeah.
kill me. Yeah.
We've got time for more questions down the front. We'll just bring you the microphone. Thank you. Thanks, Gia.
Thank you for this evening. It's fantastic.
You're welcome.
I'm not a writer, and I when you talked about going into your room and that's how you write, I kind of imagined that's what a writer does. So how does it work to write with an author like James Patterson? What is the mechanics of actually doing that?
Yeah, it's messy. It would be a lot like if I collaborated with you on a novel. It's meeting when you can, when you're in the same country, phone calls, emails, and it's the same sort of situation. We start with an idea, like we might start with the characters and then we go from there, or we might start with the plot and then we add the characters. Mechanically, we do a mini outline and then a maxi, because he's all about outlines. And he's got to have the whole thing all planned out. And that worked for. I'm not like that. I'm more of a. And so over the years, we've worked together. I think we've known each other 10 years now, and we're about to start on our 10th project together. And so it was probably 1 or 2 books in where we would have this big, beautiful outline and it's all ready to go. And I start, because, I do the sort of the grunt work of once we've mapped it all out together, I do the grunt work of the writing and I'm throwing it to him every 5,000 words. And I just slowly start to go off the plan, and he goes, come on, we're back on the road. And I'm like, no, trust me, and so we've had a bit of argy-bargy over the years of, there was this character in the inn, so that's the inn 2. The murder inn is the inn 2, really. He had this character in the inn, and I said, I don't get why this guy's here. What is he for? He's just hanging around the inn. He's just here. Has no function. And then Jim was like, just leave him in there. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Just have him doing his thing. Don't worry. And I said, oh, yeah, all right. And so I just went completely off-road and I just had him viciously stabbed to death. And he's on the ground in a pool of blood, and I sent the submission away, and he comes back and he goes, well, this is a bit awkward, isn't it? Because that's someone that I know, that's a friend of mine, that I said, hey, I'm putting you in my next novel and you're really going to like your part. And now I'm all conflicted because I really like the death. I didn't see it coming because it wasn't on the outline. And I'm like, well, there you go. And I said, just take him to lunch, you'll be all right,
Amazing.
But you would be surprised how, because I auction parts in a novel, a couple of times a year I say, hey, raise money for this hospital or whatever. You can be a character in a Candice Fox novel, and the amount of people who write to me and say, can I be murdered, or can you murder my wife, or a woman said, can you murder my son, he's 8, and I was like, oh,
No.
all right.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about him. yeah.
Oh, my God.
People are weird.
Yeah. Amazing. I should say as well, James Patterson has been, writing since 1976, and he's also done these really interesting collaborations with a number of other authors, well, Andrew Goss and Maxine Pietro, I think.
Yeah,
Pietro.
yeah.
It's an interesting kind of thing that he's done by commencing to work with kind of the next generation of writers as well.
Oh, he's taught me so much, and he really just has no he's one of those people that I can trust because he's no reason to bullshit me. It is not in his favour, and so when I write badly, it's he goes, oh no, you're better than this. But he's also someone who I can say to him, and Lee's the same. I say, can I have a little powwow? It's not related to the book. It's just, can I get you on the phone? And he's like, okay. And he was wonderful about that. I called him crying, about a year ago or something, and he talks like a freight train. He just talks, and it's going, and you're throwing couches and logs and cows and things in front of the train, trying to slow it down. When you're on the phone going, what? See, but for this phone call, I was going, and I just feel like blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, are you still there? And he goes, no, tell me more, let it all out. And I'm going, what? And so this happened, and he just listened, and I felt a lot like I was talking to my uncle or something. And he said, you're smart and you're a good writer. You're smart and you're a good writer. You're smart and you're a good writer. Don't forget that. Why are you trying to forget that? And I was like, woo, it's just lovely. And I have an email that Lee wrote me at another time when I said, can you just tell me something encouraging because this has happened? And I stuck that on my wall in my office, and those guys have just taught me things, just being around them, and then they didn't have to. And why is it in their interest to? They didn't have to, and they taught me wonderful things, and so yeah.
But it's a powerful reminder that you never stopped needing that support. You never stopped needing encouragement.
And people at my sort of level, people who are under me in their careers who've just started or their career isn't going well or whatever, they look at me and they go, oh, she's got it all worked out. She's working on her 17th novel. She knows exactly what she's doing, and and I go around going, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I've done this all before, and I never worry about, and it's only my agent, my publisher, and my friends who see me when I'm going, I'm a hack, and I'm going to have to go back to bartending,
You're going to collect great stories if you go bartending, and then you're going to write more books.
That's exactly right.
That's going to happen. Yeah. And we've got time for one more. In the middle. Thank you.
Oh, you've mentioned a few times the serial killer, but could you tell us firstly how you came to choose and meet said serial killer, and secondly, you've said he was a bore. Did you just get a dud serial killer, or are serial killers actually overrated?
Oh,
great question.
Yeah, in general, they're pretty much all the same. They're just awful people who are following an animalistic desire, and people hold Ted Bundy up as this amazing, he was so interesting and complex and intelligent. Not really. He was just a debased human who was following his horrible animalistic desires. Lawrence Bittaker was one half of a partnership called the Toolbox Killers, because they abducted young girls from all around LA and took them in a van into the mountains, and they did things to them using the contents of a toolbox. And I watched a documentary, a cheap-ass documentary. I was doing something, and I kind of came around to it and stopped what I was doing and watched, and I just thought that is the most horrific thing I've ever heard of, and I've heard some stuff. And so I went in the Wikipedia spiral. I was living in LA at the time, and I was like, he's only an hour and a half from here. And so I said to Tolerant Tim, you know how you love me? Well, I was thinking about going and talking to this serial killer because I have some questions. And, he's only an hour and a half from me, and it'll be death row in San Quentin, and I would, and he goes, all right, have fun, let me know if you survive. And so I went and I did that. Yeah, they don't tell you for some reason. It's a bit of surprise that when you get there, they actually lock you in a cage with the serial killer. Oh. Yes, it's called a full contact visit. Oh. He's uncuffed. They lock the door with a padlock. It's like a shark cage, 2 metres by 2 metres, goes floor to ceiling, and they padlock the door and walk away. At no
And is he in his own shark cage?
No, you're in the same cage. There was, when they
At San Quentin?
At San Quentin on death row.
Wow.
And so when you sign up for the visit and that, they give you the visitor's handbook, which is an A4 sheet of paper, one-sided, which says, what you should wear and where you should park and what you can bring in. At no point does it say
You will be in a shark
we are going to
cage."
lead you to a cage and put him in and put you in and uncuff him and padlock the door and walk away. There was no, and so I was sitting there going, well, this is how I die. My publicist is going to love this. This is going to, this is so
How long did you talk to
fitting.
him for?
It was 5 hours. So poor old tolerant Tim, I said, this visitor's handbook doesn't say anything about how long it is, but 2 hours max? He's at home Googling San Quentin murder, riot, Candice Fox, dead, trying to figure out where the hell I am. And then, he and I were sitting closer than you and I are sitting now.
Unbelievable.
And so I was doing all the Jack Reacher things. I was bracing my legs in case I had to spring up.
Yep.
And I was doing all of those.
Thank God you're a crime writer, right?
I
You
may
knew.
have to-
You were ready.
Yeah, I thought I may have to fight a man for my life here, and I've never been in that situation before, but I'll just make it work, I guess. And I just spent that whole 5 hours trying to get him to admit some culpability in what he had done, and it was farcical because he and this guy had done this. And there's all the evidence, there's the tapes, there's the photos, there's the this and that, the accounts from witnesses that you're playing the tapes and all that. But, it was all the other guy. And, he had a terrible childhood and nobody taught him empathy. And it really wasn't that bad anyway. And it's all the stuff that narcissistic parents say where they go, I really don't remember it like that. And I think you're exaggerating. And it was all your father. And, and I had a terrible childhood. And, and you kind of go, this is all the same stuff. But every now and then the mask would drop and I'd see the real monster in there. And for example, he said, I said, what was your plan? Were you just going to keep killing women until what? Until you got caught or what? And he goes, by the time we got to number 5, what was her name? And I said her name and he goes, whatever her name was. Like that. Wow. And I was like, there he is. There's the Hannibal inside, and the hand flick, like a flicker away. Like I've been in here for almost 40 years for murdering her, but and so, just, not...
So in answer to the question, that maybe the dud part was that his complete inability, as you say, to take any responsibility. That he hadn't learned anything from it. He couldn't reflect on it. He had no integration of it.
I'm trying to say to him, what made you like this? Where was the line? I'm very interested in school shooters, and that there's that line. And I think a lot of young people who are, mentally fucked up and they're being bullied at school and they get all the way to the line, but then they back all the way back again. Why did you step over that line and where was that line? And no. It's like I can't learn anything from this person.
So I think maybe the takeaway is be careful if you're going to interview a serial killer that you find one that is more interesting and and has done a bit more self-reflection. It's a slightly somber note to end on, but I wanted to say, I'm reminding you that books are for sale at the back.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say thank you to Candice, and then I want to tell you about our next one. But I firstly want to say, Candice, thank you for these books that are so good and unputdownable that we also can't stay up reading them because they're so intensely heart-pounding we can't sleep afterward. But it is a joy to read writing this good. They are, full of insights. They are entertaining and yet not titillating. They are brilliant. I can't recommend them enough. Please join me in thanking Candice Fox.
Thank you. Thank you so much.